You might think of Sweden as a socialist Scandinavian country that lives off IKEA. However, at the beginning of the 18th century, Sweden was a multicultural empire spanning regions surrounding the Baltic Sea. In addition, they had colonies in the current U.S. state of Delaware and the Gold Coast of Africa. Sweden was even considered one of the most powerful countries in Europe as leader of the Protestant Reformation. So, how did a country like Sweden rise to such power, and why did it last? Hopefully, you'll learn that very soon. For close to 2 centuries of Scandinavian history, the kingdoms of Norway and Sweden were under a personal union with Denmark, known as the Kalmar Union. In 1523, Sweden broke away from the union under the leadership of Gustav Vasa in the Swedish War of Liberation. However, many of the homelands of the Swedish were still under the control of the Norwegians Danish. After Sweden broke away from the union, they slowly took back their lands and expanded even farther. The first major war Sweden fought in for territorial growth was against Russia in the Livonian War. Surprisingly, Denmark-Norway, the successor to the Kalmar Union, joined the side of Sweden against Russia. The Livonian Confederation, a union of bishoprics in current Estonia and Latvia, started to fall in the mid to late 16th century, and both the Scandinavian kingdoms and Russia wanted to step into the void that would be created. Sweden claimed the lands of Estonia and Ingria, while Denmark-Norway took the island region of Oslo as a result of the Treaty of Ticina. Sweden cemented their rule in Livonia, expanded southwards in 4 consecutive wars against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Furthermore, they strengthened their claims in the easternmost part of Ingria and gained the county of Kexholm in a war against Russia. Charles IX declared the Swedish Empire in 1611 during the conflicts with Poland and Lithuania. In the 30 Years' War, Sweden demonstrated their newly gained power. Sweden was one of the major entities against the Holy Roman Emperor in his fight to end the spread of Protestantism. Sweden forged an alliance with France as a result of the 30 Years' War and benefited tremendously from the numerous peace treaties signed. Sweden gained territory in Pomerania and Bremen. However, more importantly, Sweden started to be feared as a power by the rest of Europe, heightening its prestige. Ever since the Swedish War of Liberation in the early 1520s to the mid-17th century, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden had fought 4 wars against each other, and not much land change had occurred. However, in 1643 that all changed. First with the Trotensten War, which gave Sweden the counties of Jutland and Gotland, and leased the southern island of Oslo and Halland to Sweden for 30 years. But Sweden wasn't done expanding into their previous overlord. In 1655 they declared war again and took Scania, which Scandinavia is named, Beckeling, and Bolsjön. In addition, the lease was lifted on Halland and it became a full Swedish county. 2 other counties, Trondelag and Bornholm, were given to Sweden as a result of the Treaty of Roskilde. However, the populations revolted, and in 2 years the territory had gone back to Danish-Norwegian control. The successive expansion eventually led to the fall of the Swedish Empire, as surrounding countries became jealous and weary of Sweden's growth. The end to the Swedish Empire came in one war, the Great Northern War, and I would even say it came in one battle. Denmark, Norway, Russia, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth created a coalition and attacked Sweden. At the time, Sweden's king, Charles XII, was only 14 years old, yet a brilliant tactician. He was fighting a war against one of Russia's most prominent czars, Peter the Great. Sweden quickly laid siege to Copenhagen, while the Danish army attacked Sweden's only ally in the war, Holstein-Gottorp, in the south of Jutland. And as a result, Denmark-Norway was forced to leave the war. Peter the Great was making his way to the fortress of Narva, which was in between Swedish Livonia and Ingria, and he believed he could arrive far before Charles' army and capture the fortress. However, Charles' technologically advanced army and navy allowed him to be waiting for Peter in Narva. The Swedish army of only about 10,000 annihilated the Russian army 3 times their size. Next, Charles XII marched his army southwards, again crushing coalition forces at the Duna River, where 7,000 Swedish forces defeated 20,000. Charles XII then started a campaign into the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and in 2 years and numerous battles, ousted the king, Augustus II, and replaced him with a Polish noble who favored Sweden. Augustus II was also the Elector of Saxony, however the Swedes quickly defeated them as well. Russia, which was now the only anti-Swedish nation in the war, had taken control of Swedish lands, and Peter formed the city of St. Petersburg and the land they'd taken. Peter wanted a warm water port and a capital closer to Western Europe, and Swedish Ingria was the perfect place for that. Peter offered Charles peace due to Russia's disheveled army. However, Charles wanted to oust Peter just as he did to Augustus. Charles then started a campaign into Russia, and his troops lost morale quickly due to the winter. At Poltava, the Swedish were defeated for the first time. Charles' army was destroyed, and he himself was injured by a stray bullet. Denmark, Norway, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth rejoined the war as well as Great Britain, Prussia, and Hanover. Charles went into exile in the Ottoman Empire, only returned to a weakened Sweden. As a last attempt, Charles invaded Norway. However, it disastrously failed, and Charles was killed. Sweden lost Livonia, Ingria, and all of their German territories, and Sweden was diminished to a regional power. However, Russia was elevated to a powerful state in Europe, and the Russian Empire was declared by Peter. Although the Swedish Empire didn't last, it was still an amazing feat due to Sweden's low population. Sweden made advances in the army and navy technology, which helped it defeat nations with much more manpower. Nevertheless, the end of the Swedish Empire led to an amazing modern country which strives for civil liberties and prosperity for its citizens.